Imagine a clash of titans, an impossible battle that spans centuries. On one side, the unstoppable force of the steppe, Attila the Hun, leading 100,000 horsemen, a thundering storm of arrows and hooves. On the other, the immovable object of the ancient world, Emperor Trajan, at the helm of the disciplined, heavily armored Roman legions, the epitome of military engineering and strategy. Who would win? This isn't just a fantasy matchup. It's a deep dive into two of the most formidable military doctrines in history. Let's set the stage for this epic confrontation. First, let's look at our contenders. Representing the 5th century AD, we have Attila, the Scourge of God. His empire, stretching from the Ural River to the Rhine, was built on the backs of his fearsome Hunnic warriors. The Huns were masters of mounted archery. Their primary weapon was the powerful composite bow, a marvel of engineering made from wood, horn, and sinew. From horseback, a Hunnic warrior could shoot with deadly accuracy, unleashing a volley of arrows that could darken the sky. Their strategy was one of fluid, lightning-fast attacks. They'd harass, encircle, feign retreats, and then turn to shower their pursuers with arrows. They avoided direct, grinding combat, preferring to wear down and disorganize their enemies from a distance before delivering the final, devastating charge with lances and swords. Their army of 100,000 would be a terrifying, mobile sea of destruction. Now, let's travel back in time about 350 years to the early 2nd century AD to meet our other champion, Emperor Trajan. Reigning during the absolute peak of the Roman Empire's power and territorial extent, Trajan was a soldier emperor, beloved by his troops and respected for his military genius. He commanded the Roman legions, arguably the most successful and professional fighting force in ancient history. A legionary was a walking fortress, protected by the iconic lorica segmentata plate armor, a large scutum shield, and a Gallia helmet. His primary weapon was the gladius, a short sword for close quarters stabbing, and the pilum, a heavy javelin designed to bend on impact, rendering enemy shields useless and breaking up formations. Roman strategy was built on discipline, formation, and engineering. They fought in tight, interlocking shield walls, the Testudo formation making them nearly impervious to projectiles. They marched, they built, they conquered. For this battle, let's give Trajan 8 of his finest legions, plus auxiliaries, totaling around 60,000 men. He's outnumbered, but Roman commanders often were, so the battle begins. Let's place them on a large, open plain in what is now Hungary. Perfect terrain for cavalry, but with no natural features for the Romans to anchor their flanks. A strategic challenge for Trajan right from the start. Attila would undoubtedly make the first move. The ground would tremble as 100,000 Hunnic riders surge forward, not in a single wave, but in swirling fluid masses. They wouldn't charge head-on. That would be suicide against a prepared Roman line. Instead, they would gallop just outside the effective range of the Roman pila, forming a massive, circling vortex of horsemen. Then, the sky would turn black. A rain of arrows, tens of thousands at a time, would arc down upon the Roman formations. This is the Huns' opening gambit, to sow chaos and inflict casualties from a safe distance. How would Trajan's legions respond? The command would ring out, Testudo shields would lock overhead and to the front, creating armored shells across the battlefield. The first waves of arrows would clatter harmlessly off the interlocked shields and sloped helmets. The Romans were masters of withstanding missile fire, but the sheer volume would be unlike anything they had ever faced. For hours, the storm of arrows would be relentless. Some arrows would find gaps, men would fall, and the psychological pressure would be immense. The sound alone a constant, terrifying hiss, followed by a deafening drumbeat on 60,000 shields, would be a weapon in itself. Trajan, an experienced general, would know that standing still and absorbing this punishment was a losing game. He couldn't stay defensive forever. He'd need to force a decisive engagement. But how? Chasing the Huns would be a fatal mistake. The moment the legions broke formation to give chase, the Huns would execute their classic feigned retreat. The pursuing, disorganized Romans would be picked apart by Parthian shots, their flanks exposed and their cohesion lost. So, Trajan wouldn't chase. Instead, he would likely do something quintessentially Roman. He would advance, slowly, methodically. The entire Roman line, still in tight formation, would begin to march forward, a moving fortress of steel and shields, inching across the plain. This forces Attila's hand. The Huns would have to keep moving back, constantly adjusting their distance. The advance itself is a challenge to Attila's strategy of static attrition. The Romans are closing the distance, shortening the range of the Hunnic bows and bringing their own pila into play. Seeing this, Attila would order his riders to concentrate their fire. Swarms of Huns would dart in, fire a volley at closer range, and wheel away before the Romans could retaliate with their javelins. The Roman advance would be slow and costly. Every 100 yards would be paid for in blood. The legionaries' shield arms would ache, their discipline tested to its absolute limit. This is where the battle hangs in the balance. Can the Huns inflict enough casualties and break the Roman morale before Trajan can close the distance or implement another strategy? Attila might try to envelop the entire Roman army. With his numbers, he could easily surround them. But a surrounded Roman legion is at its most dangerous. They would form a hollow square, or an orb, presenting a wall of shields and spears in every direction. Attacking this fortified hedgehog would mean charging directly into a volley of pila, and then meeting a wall of gladius-wielding legionaries. This would lead to the close quarters fight the Huns desperately want to avoid, and where the Romans excel. Trajan would have another ace up his sleeve, his auxiliaries. While the legions formed the heavy infantry corps, Roman armies relied on auxiliary troops for specialized roles. He would have his own cavalry, likely Gallic or Germanic horsemen. Though heavily outnumbered, they would not be used to fight the Huns horse to horse. Instead, Trajan might use them for targeted, disciplined charges. Seeing a group of Huns get too close or become disorganized, a cohort of Roman cavalry could thunder out, disrupt them, and then retreat back behind the safety of the legionary line. He'd also have auxiliary archers and slingers, perhaps from Crete or Syria. They would be positioned within the Roman formation, adding their own missile fire to counter the Huns. While their bows wouldn't match the Hunnic composite bow in power or range, they would add to the chaos and force the Huns to respect a certain distance. The game changer for Trajan, however, is Roman engineering. If the battle lasted into the evening, Trajan would do what Romans do best: dig. Under the cover of darkness, protected by a screening force, the legions would construct a fortified camp, a ditch, a rampart, and a wooden palisade. By morning, the open plain would no longer be open. The Romans would have a fortress. From this secure base, Trajan changes the entire nature of the war. He's no longer a vulnerable target in the open. He has a bastion to sally from and retreat to. This nullifies Attila's greatest advantage: mobility. The Huns can't effectively attack a fortified camp. Their arrows would be less effective against wooden walls, and any charge would be channeled into deadly kill zones at the gates. The war would become one of siege and supply, a war the Romans are far better equipped to win. The legions carried weeks of grain with them and were masters of logistics. The Huns, on the other hand, lived off the land and their herds. A long siege would exhaust their local resources, and their vast army of men and horses would quickly consume all available fodder. Seeing his strategy thwarted, Attila would face a choice: risk a catastrophic, full-scale assault on the Roman camp, or withdraw. A full assault would be a massacre. The Huns would have to dismount and fight on foot against the world's best heavy infantry in a fortified position. It would be a bloodbath for the Huns. Attila was brutal, but he wasn't stupid. He preserved the lives of his core warriors. So, who wins? While the image of 100,000 Hunnic riders is terrifying, the victory here likely goes to Trajan and his Roman legions. It wouldn't be a glorious, swift victory. It would be a brutal, grinding, and bloody affair. The Romans would suffer heavy casualties from the endless arrow storms, but their superior armor, discipline, and most importantly, their strategic flexibility and engineering prowess would ultimately prevail. They would weather the storm, force the battle onto their terms, and turn the Huns' strength into a weakness. Trajan, his ability to build a fortified position on the battlefield itself, is the decisive move that Attila simply has no counter for. The immovable object, through sheer grit and tactical genius, would find a way to halt the unstoppable force. It's a testament to why the Roman military machine dominated the ancient world for so long. What do you think? Could Attila, as sheer numbers and ferocity, have found a way to break the legions before they could entrench? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this historical showdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more.